It is recording. Me. Jeez. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Shell, your favorite trans writer, content creator, marketing person, customer service representative. And I'm making this video because there is a bill in the House now, in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's a big civil rights bill for a lot of people. But in my case specifically, there is a lot of pro-trans legislature involved. Basically, what would just seal the deal for us, civil rights-wise, for until they repeal it. Who knows? What it involves is basically, getting all of our rights, the same civil rights that cis people have, and extending it to trans people because of our gender identity. We would be protected under this bill for employment, housing, medical care, and our basic general ability to exist in public spheres and sectors and just be who we are. So, to that end, I'm making this video in order to address some of the concerns that I've seen a lot of people have over the last 4 years of my trans existence, or at least my outward trans existence, to address these concerns and hopefully bring more people to the side of, letting us live like people. So here we go. This is going to be fun. So as you may or may not know, the Supreme Court last year made a decision on gender identity when it comes to employment rights protections. So they, shockingly to everyone, including myself, voted in favor of keeping our rights intact, or at least it was never keeping because we didn't have them in the first place. But they voted for, they ruled that to deny trans people employment on the basis of our gender identity is unconstitutional, according to other civil rights laws that had already been passed. So basically, you take the idea that sex discrimination is unconstitutional and apply it basically to gender identity. It's not that hard. It's not that big of a deal. It seems like a no-brainer, right? We are people. We deserve equal rights. We don't deserve to be discriminated against on the basis of something we cannot help. And I don't know if you are on this side yet, but we can't help it. It is who we are. It's not a choice. It's not a lifestyle. It's not anything like that. It is intrinsic. It is part of who I am. In fact, it's a large part of who I am. Also, recently, HUD, under the Biden administration, has reversed the whatever the hell the Trump administration was doing and decided to apply those civil rights protections to housing as well. So now, also HUD has declared that denying trans people housing of any kind, whether renting or buying or whatever, on the basis of our gender identity is unconstitutional. Cool. No brainer there too, because you guys, everybody has that right already. Cis people already had that right. Just extending it to us now too. Not extra. It's not an extra right, I promise. Nothing that we're asking for is anything extra than what you've already got. So, just in case you were concerned about that. We're starting to see more representation in our government. There's some local level politicians that are trans, and this is a new kind of thing over the last few years. And we've just had our first state senator, Sarah McBride. She was elected last year. Great, wonderful, groundbreaking first state senator who is openly trans. We're kind of getting some representation there. So things are on the uptick for us. We're making progress, slowly, but it is happening. And given that we've been around for, the entirety of humanity's existence, I'd say it's about freaking time. So this equal rights bill is up, and I would really like it to pass. It's important that it passes. It would solidify our rights in legislature for the foreseeable future. That kind of stuff is really hard to overturn. We have civil rights protections in a lot of states. However, they're kind of ephemeral at best, really. I mean, when I came out in 2017, I came out in Massachusetts. I had civil rights protections there already, done deal. But in 2018, a right-wing conservative group was able to get a referendum on the ballot, and they didn't just will it into existence. They got signatures. They had they had a lot of signatures that they were able to get, and thus get it on the ballot to be possibly reversed. I had to fight for the better part of 2018. I marched in protests. I worked in phone banks to campaign. I worked with this campaign, Equality for All, or Freedom for All Massachusetts. It was a couple of years ago, forgive me. Freedom for All Massachusetts, worked with them for a bit to try to get people on our side so that they wouldn't see this referendum and, vote away our rights that we'd worked hard for. I say we, I mean other people. They kind of worked hard for it, and then I kind of came in and kind of took. It's fine. I've been on their side this whole time. So my point is, these bills, these state level bills, are kind of, without federal backing, it's kind of easy to overturn them. And I don't mean easy, but easy enough that they were able to do it in Massachusetts, of all places, which is, routinely seen as a pretty staunch liberal stronghold. As an aside, I think that's said by people who don't live in Massachusetts. But I digress. Look, we need this civil rights bill to pass, because I'll be damned if I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to fight this nonsense instead of enjoying what little time as the real me I have left. And I'm not dying or anything, but concern number one, the bathroom thing. Good and cheap. So does anybody really believe this anymore? Anybody? If you're unfamiliar, the bathroom thing is the idea that trans women, such as myself, are really just men who are trying to trick our way into women's spaces, such as bathrooms and changing rooms and things like that, in order to perform nefarious and underhanded and disgusting acts towards them, like rape or peeping or whatever it is weirdos do. And it's nonsense, right? It's nonsense. I use the ladies' room every single day. I haven't used a public restroom in probably a year at this point, but we go in, we go to the bathroom, we leave. The whole thing is cooked up by right-wing think tanks to demonize us, and to also hide the fact that they've been robbing us blind for the last I don't know how long. So yeah, the bathroom thing is nonsense. It just is. There's no evidence whatsoever to back it up. There's not even droves of men that aren't trans. There's not even droves of cis men trying to appropriate transness just to get into the women's room. It's nonsense. It just doesn't happen, really. I mean, I'm sure you could probably find maybe one or two fringe cases, but on the whole, it's just not happening, okay? It's not. It isn't. Next concern. Concern number 2. Sports ball. So, okay, now the big concern that they've lost on the bathroom thing, right? that's not really a thing anymore. So now the big concern is that trans women are entering women's sports in order to dominate the sport. And maybe they don't say it's intentional or anything, but they say that it's a consequence of allowing trans women into women's spaces and things like that. The NCAA has had regulations on trans people for the last decade. The Olympics Committee has had regulations on trans people for decades, and there's no glut of trans women coming up through these organizations and dominating the sports. It's not happening. You hear stories about a person or another excelling, and it's not even that much, It's like a one-time thing. People like to talk about UFC fighters. That UFC fighter that everybody likes to bring up, she got beaten by somebody else, or maybe even by the same person. I'd have to look that up. I'm gonna have to confirm that. But she was beaten like the next time she fought, and now does not fight anymore. Done. Like, she's not the reigning champion of women's UFC forever. It just didn't happen that way, and it doesn't happen that way. And if anything, that rhetoric is even more harmful to us, because then we can't win anything. So, like, if we win anything, is it valid? Is that fair? No, because anytime a trans woman wins anything, somebody is gonna say, well, that wasn't fair. They cheated. It's like, no, they didn't. They didn't. Hormones greatly affect the body in terms of musculature and muscle tone and muscle strength and all that stuff. I mean, I myself, a year into transition, couldn't move the same amount of weight that I could before. And I was never like huge, but it was a noticeable decline of my noticeable decline of my physical, ability. And most of these organizations have regulations that require at least 2 years of hormone therapy before trans people are able to participate. So the idea that, testosterone-fueled males are entering women's sports to dominate them, again, it's just not happening that way. That's just not happening. It is a fallacy. And to treat it as a legitimate reason why, trans women don't deserve equal rights, or trans people in general don't deserve equal rights, is ridiculous. Concern number 3. But J.K. Rowling said... J.K. Rowling is a children's author. She has written some okay children's books that people have a lot of nostalgia for, and that's totally fine. What she is not is an expert on transgender people or anything that we've done. She's not an expert. She seems to be quite misled about any of that, and she's not a politician. She's not a doctor. She's not a therapist. She's a woman who has some very misguided ideas about what it is to be trans, and she has suffered some trauma in her past, which is unfortunate. I understand. I have also been sexually assaulted by a cisgender man, and it's unfortunate. I want to make that perfectly clear. I do not wish any harm on her. I absolutely sympathize and empathize with her position as a person who has been sexually assaulted by a cisgender man. Absolutely 100%. I've been there. I know how it is. However, it has nothing to do with trans people or trans women specifically. It's not. Also, she's a children's author. Can we stop, can we stop, please, taking what, random celebrities say is gospel? And I say that to both sides. I'm going to be an enlightened centrist on this one and say both sides should probably stop listening to celebrities who haven't known what it's been to be a normal person in at least a decade. Okay? Can we? Concern number 4. Appropriation. I hear a lot of people say that trans women don't know what it's like to be a woman. And, we were socialized as male, and we don't have a lifetime of female experience to go on, and it makes us, it's not our feelings are not enough to make us women. And for one, I want to say that not all women have the same experiences anyway. So if you want to reduce women to, I don't have a womb, so I'm not a woman, you're counting out a lot of women on that, right? There's a lot of cisgender women who, for whatever reason, also lack those parts, and I don't think anyone would say that they're not women. So to reduce us to specific, you know, body parts and say that that is what makes a woman, I have to disagree there, and I'm not alone in that one. I don't think. Um, the other part is my experiences. So a lot of people would argue that I was socialized as a male. Um, and there is some truth to that, I suppose, in that, society tried to socialize me as a male. I wouldn't say I had the typical male experience, unless the typical male experience involves begging God every day to please either make me a girl or take the feelings away. Uh, I don't know if the typical male experience involves policing your every thought, action, sentence that you say, word, everything that you do and are and present to the world goes through a filter of of is this in any way, could this in any way be construed as feminine? Because if it is, I need to adjust, because I don't want to give anyone the idea that I am anything less than a male. Because if I do, there's pretty severe societal consequences for that. Or at least there were back when I was growing up. Um, I wouldn't call that a typical male upbringing. Sorry. I don't think most males uh, completely dissociate from their lives by the age of 14 because, they're not able to be who they are. That's not something that really, I don't think that's the typical experience. Um, Secondly, it's a whole other philosophical discussion that is kind of irrelevant to apply that to whether these people, and I by that I mean trans people, deserve um, civil rights and equality as human beings in our society. Then no, don't you don't need to. Like, we're human beings, we deserve equal rights, and our equal rights basically are just saying, hey, don't discriminate against people because of something that they are, because of who they are. Um, you can discriminate on things like what people do, or you know how they act, and by that I mean, we all know people who act inappropriately. By all means, discriminate away. But if you want to discriminate against me because of some accident of birth, I don't feel like that's like super fair. And I don't think a majority of people would disagree with me on that. So really, the whole conversation of you know who's a woman, who isn't a woman, all this kind of stuff is it's kind of muddling the whole picture. It's not important, okay? But I will say that since transitioning, I believe I have run the gamut of female experiences. I worry about being too feminine. I worry about being not feminine enough. I worry about am I a bitch? Because I've been called one several times, including in my workplace, by people who I worked for. I asked a friend the other day, is it is it okay? Am I a bitch because I don't let people walk all over me, or am I just being assertive? And then I was congratulated for completing my my transition. I worry if I dress too slutty. I worry if I dress too conservatively. I'm worried if I've been seen in certain ways. Or I go through the same image problems that, like, I would say 90% of women go through, if not more. It's I get I, and that's just my own internalized stuff. I get I've been, as I had mentioned, I've been sexually assaulted. I have been watched my male privilege like evaporate over the course of this time. I have had men cease listening to my expert opinion on things, even though I am more proficient or more knowledgeable in a certain subject than they are. They ignore me now. I have received, I have received countless, and I mean countless, unsolicited genitalia pictures from men, like a lot. Can I just say something, guys? Don't do that. Don't do it to cis women. Don't do it to trans women. Don't do it to anyone. If they don't ask for it, just don't send it. We don't want it. I'm not like I'm not like happy to get it. I can't. There has been no dick pic that I have been elated to receive. Not a one. Not a one. Not even my boyfriend. Just keep it in your pants, okay? Unless we ask for it. Jeez Louise. Concern number 5, the children. The last concern is a tough one. And it is a concern for children. And it's a valid one. Because they are vulnerable. Children are vulnerable, and they need to be protected, right? I don't think anyone's going to argue against that. That seems totally normal and fine to me. People who don't understand what it is to be trans are understandably concerned about the welfare of trans youth. And I get that. You know, it's a big deal. It's a lifelong thing, or it can be, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It isn't, and I get that. It's hard because a lot of people, people don't understand what it means to be a trans youth, and I am not a trans youth by any means, but I used to be, and I can tell you from firsthand experience and from secondhand accounts from a lot of other trans people that it is terrible. It's terrible to be to watch. So puberty can be horribly damaging. My whole, drive and ambition to do well and, make something of myself, or like to even like be in society and engage with people and be around other people was pretty much dead by the time I was 14, 15. I had no desire to do anything because I couldn't be myself. It came later when I grew up a little bit and I, developed feelings for other people that I decided that, or that I knew that, making something of myself was important. But it wasn't for me, it was for other people. And now I do it for me, right? Like I am who I am now, and who I always was, and I'm just now able to be that person. But it I kind of care about what happens to me now, even if even if no one else is around. That was not the case before, and I can say with a lot of certainty that a lot of that was due to the untreated dysphoria that I suffered through as a kid. And it wasn't, I didn't totally understand it at first, and but I did eventually find out what being trans meant, and I understood that that's what I was. But given the negative stigma that exists in all corners of a society, we're just now starting to get positive representation in media and in politics, because otherwise we've had none to speak of. We've been portrayed as serial killers or sex workers. Not that there's anything wrong with being a sex worker, but there's a lot of stigma around it. We've been demonized as perverts and laughing stocks and this and that at best. Like laughing stock is like the best we could have been when I was growing up in the 90s. in the 80s, and less the 80s, more the 90s when I was a teenager. Um, there was no positive representation. I knew there was something different, and my early ventures uh, into the internet, and I don't mean my personal early ventures, but like the early advent of the internet that we had a little bit of information, but not a lot of good information about what it meant to be trans. But what I did figure out was that that concept and those words um, spoke to something inside of me, and it's because I was finally able to put a name to feelings I'd been having since as far back as I could remember. Um, that I never told people about because intrinsically, due to societal influences, that it's not something you talk about because we're always being portrayed negatively. You get to make the association that being trans is akin to being a serial killer, and it's certainly not something that you tell other people about. That was like the worst thing that could happen. I remember having panicked, moments in the bathroom before going to school in the morning, wiping off eyeliner and mascara, and not knowing really how because, God, I'm not gonna ask anybody, but like, you know, taking off makeup that I prayed no one would notice, um, and just being miserable that I had to put up this facade all day, or be outed as this horrible monster that would immediately, like, I thought we'd have to move. I did consider once coming out to my grandmother who raised me, if you're not aware. I considered it once, and we did have a couple of conversations about it later on in my teen years, but um, I denied. I always denied it. But I did consider it once, and the consideration only took like half a second because I immediately thought, nah, we'd have to move. I thought we'd have to like move away, start a new life because it wouldn't be accepted. And I don't know if that's not true. I don't know if it's not true. Anyway, uh, the, my point is that what was my point? Oh no, this is my point. I need a drink. Oh, that's rough. Um, I think that's been sitting out a little too long. Clearly, this has been done with minimal, minimal prep and minimal rehearsal. My point is that I knew, even with minimal information, I knew that my feelings of not being quite what I not being quite right, in terms of my gender, in terms of my body, in terms of all of that. Um, I knew, and I think the fear is that a lot of young people will do it, um, in haste, and make a hasty decision that they will regret later. But the reality is that also really doesn't happen a whole lot. Um, the amount of people who transition, of all the people who transition, only I believe it's less than a percentage, less than 1%, ever detransition, and the vast majority of people who detransition, and by that I mean they cease, any treatments. They go back to socially presenting as the person that, as the um, uh, assigned at birth gender. Um, the vast majority of people who detransition do it because of societal pressure or lack of support from family or bigotry or discrimination. There are a lot of societal factors at work that make it difficult to transition, and it's to the point where a lot of people who are trans, will actively go back because they can't take the stigma or the ostracization anymore. Um, that's the reality. the vast majority of people who transition have their lives exponentially made better by it. And very, very few people regret anything. And just um, as an addition to that, no reasonable trans people are really advocating for, minors to undergo surgery or undergo any permanent, kind of treatment that's going to be difficult to undo should they decide that it's not who they are or right for them, because it does happen. It's very, very, very rare, but it does happen. And the idea is that that's not, no reasonable trans person wants that. Um, I, the commonly accepted form of transition for young people is generally seen as social transition, which includes wearing different clothes, maybe doing something with their hair, maybe calling them by a different name, general presentation as the gender that they are, and it's who they are. It's not like I personally, and this is me personally. This is not me speaking on behalf of any other trans people, but I don't really love the whole identify as thing because it implies a choice, and I don't. It's not a choice. It's about as much of a choice as like, and I said this recently. Transitioning was as much of a choice as, you know, if you're on fire and you decide to put it out is a choice. Not really much of one. The idea is not to overly, is not to push children through, lifelong permanent treatment. It's to allow them to be who they are, and maybe puberty blockers, which can, it just delays puberty for a few years until they reach the age of majority. It's all very, and then as soon as they go off of them, they undergo the puberty of the birth of the gender that they were assigned at birth. Or in the case of someone who would be transitioning, you go off the puberty blockers and then start taking hormone medication, which is what I take now. And even then, that even after a couple of years of hormones, and the adult stuff, not the kid stuff. I mean that very sarcastically. Please don't take that out of context. Um, Even after a couple of years of real um, hormone replacement therapy, which is the medical term for the treatment, a lot of it still can be reversed. If I hadn't gotten surgery and I went off of my hormones, I would have gotten, well, and if I hadn't gotten laser, I would have gotten my facial hair back. I would have grown more body hair again. I would have, my skin would have gotten rough again. My body would fat would redistribute back to a more masculine form. Not everything is completely irreversible, but most of it goes back. If you go off of your meds. So, no one is suggesting that young people go through very permanent things. It's just not an issue. But puberty can be hell for untreated trans people. It just is. Watching my body turn into this thing that I had no desire to be whatsoever, I felt no connection to, I felt no pride in, I felt no nothing towards. It was either apathy or actual, disgust. And it was hell. It was hell. And then, but never, you never being able to tell anybody about it. So I think that the fear of you know young kids being transed by propaganda or anything, it's not true. It's not happening that way. I don't think anybody is going out of their way to transition unless they're extremely, you know, sure about that, because it's pretty in your face dysphoria. Um, it's pretty like for me it was. I know that's not the it's not the same case for everybody, but for I think a lot of people, gender dysphoria is pretty hard hitting, and pretty blatant. Um, because when you look at yourself and you say, "Wow, I really hate this facial hair," and I really feel pretty ambivalent towards everything else that's going on, um, you kind of figure something's up, right? Um, but anyway, I hope that addresses some of the concerns. No one, no one is out there trying to trans the kids, um, but I do want to prevent the harm that I experienced and the trauma that I experienced, um, from happening to other people, and that's where we start. To ensure that young people have the ability to, um, learn that you know it's not bad. It's not, inherently wrong to be trans. It's normally it's not. I mean, it's statistically abnormal, but it's not a bad thing that it's not. It doesn't make you bad to be trans. It's not bad. It's just a thing. Um, it's not. It doesn't make you a monster. It doesn't make you anything like that. It's part of who you are, and the bigger harm is in not addressing it. The bigger harm is in forcing them to be who they aren't for a number of years until they, either lash out or, you know, sink into a horrible depression or, God forbid, kill themselves. Because, I mean, I know I was on the verge a couple of times. So, like, I want to make this very clear that we deserve to have our understanding of ourselves respected. We know who we are, and I've heard this a lot. I've heard a lot of people say, you don't even know who you are. How can you? We know who we are. We do. I've known forever. We just do. We know who we are just as well as you know who you are. The only difference is that, you didn't have to question it to get there. Um, that's it. That's the difference. We know. In the hopes of preventing, further undue harm to trans people in general, um, I, I just wanted to make sure that people could understand what this was about, without having to type it 100 million times, because it's getting yeah, it's getting bad. Because I'm getting tired and I'm old and I don't want to do it anymore. I want to put this behind me, right? Like we want to live our lives. I'm tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to get this done. So, to that end, if you find yourself sympathizing with my words or this video, or, if you are in agreement, or you think that, whatever you think, if you think that we deserve equal rights, then I'm asking you. Um, I'm posting this on Facebook, so that means I know all of you. I know all of you. I've met all of you personally, or else you wouldn't be seeing this. Um, if it gets posted beyond Facebook, I can't help that. So but if we if you find yourself in agreement, then I'm asking you as a friend, or as a family member, or even just an acquaintance. I don't ask a lot of favors of people, but I would ask you this one favor as a trans woman who has suffered, undue stigma of an actually extremely easily treatable condition. Um, Call your representatives, reach out to them, tell them that you support this and you want them to support it. Please, I am asking you to do that. I don't ask for a whole lot, but it's a big ask. Like making phone calls, especially. Hey, I'm a millennial. I get it. I don't love making phone calls either, but um, if you if you can, and if you're able, and if you think that trans people deserve equal rights, and you think that we should be able to have them regardless of who's in office or what state we live in, then reach out to your congressperson, reach out to your senators when it gets to the if it gets to the Senate, reach out to them, tell them that you support it, please. It could save a lot of lives. It could save a lot of, you know, cost, blood, tears, sweat, all of that. You know, we could do a lot of really good work with a strong trans rights and civil rights, equal rights legislation at the federal level. Um, so, yeah, that's it. That's all I ask. It's not a huge deal. Just a quick phone call, or a letter, or an email, or any of those things. Smoke signals if you got them. I don't care. Just please. um, if you've made it to the end here, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. This is done again with minimal prep and mostly just off the cuff, from the heart. So, I thank you for your help if you decide to give it, and I appreciate it, and I love every one of you, and